Hello, everyone, and a very good evening to all of you. I am Bhavanshi Patel, and I welcome you all in the foreign lecture series of Eduhub community in association with University of Engineering and Management Jaipur, Association of Computing Machinery Student Chapter. It is a very glorious moment for it is a very glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of the Eduhub international community. Eduhub community is an open platform for all of the students to empower each and everyone and also to learn together. Our community is also open to work with other communities and people. EduHub will not only keep you updated about the latest technologies, but will also provide career pathway and guidance to everyone. Our tagline is Let's Take You Forward. So, in order to stay updated for the latest information, do subscribe us on the YouTube and you can also follow us on the Facebook and LinkedIn platforms. I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Roman Frolov for accepting the invitation and presiding the webinar on Node.js. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to give you a brief about our speaker today. Mr. Roman is a senior software engineer at Codesphere, ex-CTO of TAU, and also a winner of Moscow. Roman has been a Node.js developer since 4 years now, and during that time, Roman has applied his Node.js knowledge to launch successful projects in such areas as blockchain, Internet of Things, electric vehicles, and cloud services. So now I would like to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor of University of Engineering and Management Jaipur, Professor Dr. Biswajoy Chatterjee, to enlighten today's webinar and give us an introduction about ACM chapter as well as University of Engineering and Management Jaipur. Over to you, sir.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited today, to say the least. I'm very excited to hear from Mr. Roman Frolov. I was just having a discussion prior to the start of the webinar with Mr. Roman Frolov, and I asked him that, do you actually go for this language, Node.js, is your specialization language? And I got to understand that there is hardly any language existing in the computer science world that Mr. Roman Frolov has not worked upon. So I'm sure that our students are getting a huge opportunity to hear from somebody who is a real professional and a real expert in this field. So I'm sure that the students will take this opportunity to the fullest. Because this webinar is live on YouTube, I request all the entire audience to kindly post your questions in the chat box while you are in the webinar, and those questions will be taken over at the end of the webinar. About Mr. Roman Frolov, as I can see, he is at the moment a senior software engineer at Codesphere, ex-CTO of TAU, and the winner of Hack Moscow. But I'm sure that his profile extends much, much beyond this. And the way he is looking at the language, looking at the computer language, the way he was speaking, I'm really, really excited to say the least. Regarding ACM chapter, let me tell you, ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, it is the biggest organization, computer science related organization in the world. And it has several chapters in institutions all across the world. And amongst them, UEM Jaipur is also one of the most active members. And we organize regular webinars, talks, hackathons, programming challenges, through which students from all across the state of Rajasthan, the entire country India, and in fact the entire world get opportunity to go for their programming practices. On behalf of this ACM chapter and the University of Engineering and Management, in association with this Eduhub international community, I am excited and I'm proud to host Mr. Roman Frolov. Thank you, sir, for joining us today, and I'm sure our students will be extremely enlightened. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Bhavanshi. You may kindly take over from here.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your words. Now I welcome Mr. Roman Frolov. It's really an honor for us that you have come over here. We really appreciate it. And you have a great time talking to our students now, and we all would love and are really looking forward to hear from you. Mr. Roman, you can take it from here.
Thank you very much for a warm introduction and the opportunity to talk to the students. So this presentation is all about Node.js, and even though Node.js is pretty big and we definitely won't cover all of the topics associated with Node.js, I'll try to share the most important parts about it that, at least for me, made this language my favorite and a go-to language. As being said in the introduction, I am a senior software engineer at Codesphere. We are basically developing a cloud code editor with all the cloud services that you can think of, like databases and domains and everything. And basically allowing people to build their apps all in a single tab of their browser. And we do all that using Node.js. So yeah, Node.js has many applications, and during the presentation, I'll show you some of them. So let's get started. So here is a table of contents. We will go through the introduction. We'll talk a little bit about what the Node.js is, why to use Node.js, some success stories, some surveys. We'll go through the event loop, which is a feature that allows Node.js to be highly competitive amongst different programming languages. We'll go through the JavaScript V8 engine. We'll go through the package management. And as well, we'll have a small demo just to show you how to write your server on Node.js. Let's get started. So Node.js is an open source JavaScript runtime environment, which basically means that it runs JavaScript code. It exists like when you run your application, it runs together with your application, helping to work with memory and with the resources of the operating system. V8 was developed by Google, and it was released in 2008, which is actually like it might sound like it was like it's been around for a while, but it was just like 13 years ago, and JavaScript has been around only for 24 years ago. And it is very fortunate that it was released in 2008, because in 2009, Ryan Dahl has created Node right after the V8 release, basically next year. And so what Node.js solves is that JavaScript used to be a browser language. So you were able to write scripts in JavaScript for your web pages. But actually, like, the history of JavaScript, it already had a server-side version like way before Node.js. It just wasn't successful enough, so the project faded away, and browsers and server-side JavaScript was not on the horizon until 2009, when the first version was released using the V8 engine with the event loop, and a bit later in 2010, the package manager npm was released for Node.js. So why Node.js is where it is today? Why is it popular? Why do I use it? So first of all, it's really fast. It's even though it is a single-threaded language, and we will talk about it later, it still uses the resources of a machine where it runs on very efficiently. It's very lightweight. It allows asynchronous operations. It is open source, so you know exactly what you're running. You can always refer to the source. You can take a look at how things work. And of course, there is a huge community around this project. It is also scalable because it also related with how complex the language is, and since Node.js is, let's say, relatively easier than some other programming languages, it allows to scale it pretty well. It is also maintainable because there are a lot of JavaScript developers out there, and you can use single language across different services. For example, you can use it on the front end, and you can use it on the back end as well, thus having engineers work on both ends. The survey of Node.js users showed that 43% of them are using Node.js for enterprise apps. And this is an incredible number for like the user base of Node.js is very big, and having such a high number of people using Node.js in production for enterprise apps is actually a very good sign of how much of the opportunity there is for the language and how big the application scenarios are. And here are some of the examples. These are companies that use Node.js successfully in 2021. I think we all know at least some of them, and it's crazy to think that it is used in organizations that basically do space missions and all the other popular services that have millions of users, and Node.js allows to handle basically billions of requests, and it can scale up as much as you want to. As we were talking, Node.js is pretty fast, and the main feature of it is the event loop, which is basically to understand what it is, we need to go through some of the components that operating system has. Some of them are virtual, some of them are hardware. Just let's reiterate through them. It will help us to understand what the event loop is and how it helps Node.js achieve its really fast execution time. So first thing is the process. So what the process is, it is an instance of your program, your app that you wrote, let's say Node.js, and the process can have multiple threads, but in case of Node, there is only one thread, one main thread. And the process is also independent. It's independent from other processes. Where is in case of a thread, threads of a single process, they share the environment. So they're not independent. And the thread itself is a smallest like virtual component of OS that can be managed by a scheduler. And a scheduler is a piece of software which basically tracks the current status of hardware and schedules the operations on hardware that is free, which completed tasks. So it basically manages queue and it manages the resources. It also does that for virtual components such as threads, processes, and data flows. And yeah, as we discussed, thread is the smallest element that it can manage. Another concept that we need to reiterate is blocking and non-blocking input-output operations. And that basically decides whether your operation will block the execution of other operations or not. For example, you make the first request, which takes a really long time, and it might take 2 or 3 seconds, and your next request, you will have to wait for them. You won't be able to start them. Whereas in the case of non-blocking I/O, you will be able to start the execution of the first request, and then after it was started, next request can start their execution. And when the first request finally executes, you will receive a call back. So the event loop is what allows Node.js to perform non-blocking I/O operations. Despite JavaScript being single-threaded, and that is actually a catch. You might hear that Node.js is single-threaded a lot, but that is a simplification. So Node.js indeed uses a single thread for event loop, which is the main thread. But on the side, like or internally, it has a pool of like worker threads that can be used. And there is actually a great diagram that I found. So whenever you have a request, it will go into the event loop. One cycle of event loop handles one individual request. Then, if a request is non-blocking, then we give this request from event loop to one of our workers, which is an internal thread, which we just take from a pool. It's available, let's take it, let's give it a task. And when it's done, it will basically return us a function, which is called a callback, which will return into event loop and add it to a queue and return back to our client when its time comes. That is a bit simplified version of it. If we go into more detail, here's how it looks under the hood. It's still simplification, but it's more detailed. You can see that event loop communicates with event queue. So event queue is where the requests go initially. So they get into a queue. Event loop iterates through it, handling each individual request at a time. Then it basically asks whether a request is blocking IO or not. And if it is blocking, then event loop basically stops and waits until this request is being executed fully. And the response is being sent to the client. If it's not, then we, as you can see here, is a line, an arrow that goes back to event loop. So yeah, if it's non-blocking, we can continue and handle the next request. And when this first request proceeds, it goes into one of the worker threads, which after executing this request will return back a callback, a function that we basically created, and it will be called after the request is executed, has finished its execution. So talking about the V8 JavaScript engine, as I said, it was introduced, it was first released in 2008. It allows you to run JavaScript code. It is written in C++. And yeah, we're talking about engines, so here's a cool picture of that. It is open source, it is a high performant, it has a great garbage collection. And if you don't know what garbage collection is, it's basically freeing up the resources once they were used and are no longer needed. For example, you created an object or some kind of an array, a primitive, and you used it, and then you went out of the scope. Then V8 recognizes that you no longer need this array, so this memory can be freed up. So it basically garbage collects it and frees up the memory that can be reused in later time. So what V8 does is compiles JS code into the native bytecode that can be understood by the system. So handling call stack is basically a good. You probably already know what a call stack is. If you have ever had any issues in browser and you open the console and you saw this like red error, and you could see there are like lines that go one after another. This is basically a stack. This is how a function was executed. It's usually like a function called after a function after a function. So there is like a nesting. You can go through the stack. Yeah, V8 does handling of the call stack, manages like memory allocations for new objects, garbage collects old memory that is no longer in use. It provides data types, all that kind of stuff. And also it can optionally provide the event loop. Why optionally? Well, because V8 is actually used by Chrome. It's used by Google Chrome and other browsers. And they usually have their own event loop. But in case of Node.js, we don't have that. We don't have a browser. We're independent from it, but we're using V8, and V8 provides an event loop that we need to run our asynchronous, non-blocking I/O operations. This is the this is basically a structure of V8 with its components. So at the top, you can see that what V8 does is a heap memory allocation, call stack execution. Then there are different components of it that are kind of like optimize your code, optimize your bytecode, allow, for example, the use of WebAssembly, JS interpretation. All these elements are part of V8 and what makes V8 as great as it is. And now let's talk about a package management. So not package management, or what we call it, NPM for short. First of all, like it serves two purposes. First is it is an online repository for code, for packages as we call them, and package can be some kind of library that you can use in your project. And except for that, it is a CLI tool, which is like command line interface that you can use from your terminal to install packages, to version control it, and to publish packages as well. NPM is the largest package manager that we have, and it has over 800,000 packages available. And these packages are being built and maintained by community. So just imagine how big is the community behind the language. I mean, the runtime, if you're talking about Node.js. Yeah, here's just a little cute illustration how it happens. So you can think about NPM as this warehouse. And in this warehouse, there are a lot of packages. And when you publish your package, like little Wombat takes this package from you and puts it into this warehouse so that your friendly JavaScript developers, I mean Node.js developers, can send their Wombat, and it will bring your package to them so they can use your code in their applications. That's how NPM works in basic terms. And when you install something in NPM, it gets into dependencies of this file, which is called package.json. But this file does actually more than just managing packages and dependencies. Package.json is basically all the metadata of your project. It gives a good description, like starting from name up to dependencies and engine that this project should be run on. You can also write scripts that will allow, it's basically create an alias for some command that you want to execute. You can create like test, run your application, so run it in development mode. Like you can come up with anything. There are also hooks that will help you to automate the flow when you're installing packages, for example. Yeah, but you can think about it as a manifest of your project. So taking it all together, I know that's a lot of information. Let's make a small demo of a small server that we will write in Node.js. So here is my terminal. Let's create a directory that will be called demo. We'll open this directory. As you can see, it's open right now. But we'll run our command that will populate this directory, which is called npm init and y for yes. It will basically initiate our Node.js project. So let's take a look what's inside. Now we have this file, which is called package.json. And here you can see that it was already printed to us. It has name, it has version, description, which is empty, and has a main file. So yeah, let's continue and create our first Node.js application. We'll create a file, name it index.js. As it said, it's our main file. We'll open it up in my text editor or code editor, which is Atom. And let's start writing it. So first of all, we're going to import a native module, which is called HTTP. And by the way, Node.js has really great native modules that you don't have to install. They're already there out of the box with Node.js. So we have this import, which we assign to a variable, or a constant to be precise, which is called HTTP. And now we need to create a server. So let's create a server by using a function of HTTP module, which basically says create a server. And this function gets a function as a parameter, which has two arguments, request and response. Let's say that so we were building, our goal is to build a server that will say hello Node.js. So we want to navigate on our local machine to some site, some page, and get plain text, hello Node.js. To do that, we first say that our status code will be 200, which means okay, if you are familiar with HTTP status codes. Next, we will set header saying that our content type is text plain, because we're not gonna return HTML in this case. And then we want to end the response by saying hello Node.js. Having assigned the server now, it just sits there in a constant. It's not started, it's just created. So we need to start it. To do that, we call a listen function, which first accepts a port as a first argument, and as a second, it will be a URL. In our case, it's localhost. And the third argument is a callback, which is a function that will be called when a server has finally started. Remember this non-blocking IO operation? We say start a server, and this operation can take some time. So we pass this function to be executed when the request completes. And let's say that our server has started. And yeah, that is our Node.js server. Let's see how it works. So to execute our file, we write node index.js. You can omit the index suffix, and the server has started. So where it has started? It started on our local machine on the port 3000. So let's open our browser and let's head to localhost port 3000, and let's see. Hey, here's our text. Hello Node.js, and this is our first server in Node.js. It looks pretty nice, right? It's pretty clean. It's pretty simple. It is high level because JavaScript is a high level language. And yeah, that's it with the demo. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
So I think the organizers need to read the questions from the chat boxes, if any.
That would be great.
Because this is a private link, so I believe the questions will be there in the chat box of YouTube.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation, and we were very happy to listen it from them. So now, for all the attendees, the flow is open to send in the questions. You all can drop the questions in the comment section. We will be taking your questions one by one from there. So we have certain questions. Roman, can you see the questions in the comment section?
I can see like one question in a notification.
Okay. So should I tell you the questions and you can answer that? We can do it
Yeah,
that
that
way.
would be great.
Yeah, sure. So this guy is asking, how is Node.js better than other frameworks which are most popularly used, and what are the some good implementations projects for Node.js?
All right. So the question is probably about different runtimes, I believe. So there is like Node.js, there is Deno that is new, there is Dart, and others. So in my and TypeScript as well. So if we're talking about like Node.js, it's like it has like a big community behind it. So you have many packages. It's pretty easy to like onboard there. With for example, if you're using TypeScript, that basically it transpiles back to JavaScript and you're executing the same Node.js, unless you're using the Deno, which is a new runtime, but it's still in progress. And I believe other than Deno, there's not much good support for TypeScript. And with other like Dart, CoffeeScript, I haven't used them, so I can't say anything about them. My most amount of experience is with Node.js and TypeScript.
Okay. So the second question we have is from Swapan Kumar Shri, and he wants to ask that he wants you to explain him NPM by an example.
Okay, sure. Let's say you have an application in Node.js, and right now during demo we have written a small server, but we use native package, and our server would be pretty complex if we continue to use this server, this package, because it would be pretty low level. HTTP has great functionality, but you will have to write a lot of abstraction around this functionality. So that's why you might want to use some package that others wrote and are maintaining. For example, there is a great package for API development, which is called Express. And for doing that, for using it in your project, you would go and install it using npm, Node Package Manager. And yeah, that is the flow with npm. You can search for these packages online through Google and then install them through your terminal in your project.
So the other question is what is a first class function in JavaScript?
Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure. What is the first class function in JavaScript?
Not sure if I know the answer.
Yeah, no worries. You can move on to the other question. How do you manage packages in your Node.js projects? This is the question.
Yeah, you have package JSON, which we have discussed, and you have lists of your dependencies. There are dependencies, and there are development dependencies. And when you install something through your terminal, npm updates your package JSON. And also, when you install the dependencies with npm, you get another file which is called package lock.json, which fixes the versions that you have installed. So package lock is actually another important file that you should always commit to Git, because you want to use the same versions of packages that you use during development. You don't want to do a fresh install every single time.
Okay. Then we have another question as well, which says, which database is best to use with Node.js?
Okay.
And what are the benefits of using, and what are the benefits of using Node.js as well? So this is the
Okay. Yeah, regarding the database, it all depends on the context, depends on the problem that you need to solve. For example, among the relational databases, my favorite is PostgreSQL. I love it because it is open source. It has great community, which is also, like I already said multiple times, community is always good for technology, and like looking at the community is always a part of selecting a technology for your project. It has great work with objects, and JavaScript. There are a lot of you work with objects all the time with JSON objects, and Postgres allows you to store objects in database. It allows you to query them, to access their properties, and yeah, that's pretty helpful because it allows you to use relational database in kind of like this key value kind of style, like Mongo. And yeah, in other cases, if you don't need relational database, you can go with some key value database like Mongo or Redis. Yeah, there are many options. My favorite is Postgres. Node.js. What was the question about Node.js, the second part?
It was that, what are the benefits of using Node.js?
Like personally, I love Node.js because it allows me to implement my ideas relatively fast. For example, if I was using a lower level language, yes, I would benefit from efficiency. I would benefit maybe from memory management, from execution speed. But in terms of development, the development time with Node.js is much shorter with other languages, while at the same time you still have a pretty fast execution speed.
Should I be telling the another question? Are you
Yeah,
done?
sure. Go ahead.
So the Logic wants to ask that, what is the best way to deploy Node.js code?
Best way to deploy.
Yeah.
You probably mean to deploy your application on some server. Well, there are multiple ways to do that. Of course, you can go like the hard way. You can rent your own virtual machine on AWS or DigitalOcean, then configure a server, do all that. And then finally, after a day of configuration, you will launch your app. But that is the hard way. The easier way would be to use an app that allows you to launch it without all this server configuration stuff. That's actually one of the things that we do at Codesphere. So in codesphere.com, if you're curious, we allow you to write your app in the browser and also launch it in the same place. So you don't have to configure any servers, any complex stuff. You just write code and start it, just like you started locally. There are other options that are presented on the market. For example, Heroku is a pretty popular one, and both Codesphere and Heroku allows to deploy apps for free, so you can use them. You don't have to pay for anything. I think you're muted.
Are you muted? Yeah.
I'm so sorry, my mic was mute. One more question is that, how many API functions are there in Node.js?
Oh, whoa. Yeah, I don't know. I've never counted that actually. There are like a bunch of native modules. I would say like in dozens, and I can only imagine how many API calls are there.
Okay, so we have another question which says, how do threading works? Threading works.
Okay, that's a good question. So we have our main thread that does this event loop thing, and then we have internal pool of threads that we get from the system. So once there is a request and it is asynchronous non-blocking IO operation, then we just pass it to a thread from this pool, and yeah, that's how it works. So Node.js is just, it has a main thread, and then it uses systems threads. It passes operations to threads whenever it recognizes a non-blocking IO operation.
Okay. So we have another question from Arnab Roy, who asked that, can you tell me how can be Node.js used in a live server if he's working on a website project? Like he wants to know about the real implementation of that.
Okay. With Node.js, you can create an API for your website. For example, if your website has some data that is persistent, that persists between user sessions, you can have a database for it. You can use Postgres, and then you need to serve this data somehow, because you can't access your database directly from your website due to security reasons. So you will have your server built in Node.js. You will create an API that will allow you to communicate between your website and your server, and you will also have communication between database and your server in Node.js. Yeah, that's like pretty basic application of Node.js that I can think of. You can also build command line interfaces in Node.js. You can write scripts that will be executed from your terminal. Yeah, there are many things you can do with Node.js.
Okay. We have another question from Vedant Dungaria, which says that explain the steps how to control flow controls the function calls. I mean, how control flow controls the function calls.
Yeah, can we go to the next question?
Yeah, sure, we can. So
Thank you.
Soumyadeep Mitra has asked that, can you say something about Cheerio and requests, FS and path module of Node.js and utility as well?
What was the first one?
It was something about Cheerio and request FS and the path module of Node.js and utility.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a question
Yeah.
about native modules, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, utility package is just a bunch of utility functions that you can use. For example, one of the very popular ones would be like Promissify, which allows you to, if you know what the callbacks are in JavaScript, then instead of having to treat callbacks with your functions, you could use util Promissify to create a promise that you can use with async await syntaxes, which is very convenient. With other native packages, like with FS, you can work with files, you can work with them in a synchronous way. As we discussed earlier, blocking operations. You will be blocking your entire application, waiting until the file is being read or written. Or you can use a synchronous API of that package and do things in a synchronous way without blocking other operations. Yeah, there are a lot of functionality in native modules.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess that's it with the questions. We do not have any more questions now.
All right, thank
So
you.
yeah. And also, I also want to, give a message to the attendees that please, we'll be sharing a feedback form in the comment section, and if you will be filling it, you will be getting the certificate. So do not forget to mark your attendance in there. And lastly, sir, Dr. Chatterjee, sir.
Yes. Hello.
So, do you want to add anything more?
No, it was a wonderful presentation. I'm sure that the students have benefited immensely from it. The questions, the questions were also good. There are a few questions which maybe could not be understood properly. So I think it was a wonderful session, sir, and you really made the students enriched. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have some links to share, for example, for this presentation that we can share after the event. So if you want to watch presentation once again, or if you want to have to read some sources about the topics that we discussed, we'll provide the links after the event.
Yeah, sure. You can send it to me or Priya. Or you can even send
Sure.
it here if you can on the YouTube link in the YouTube
Sure.
comment section.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it later a bit.
No worries, no worries. Or you can give it to us. We'll spread it to the attendees. Sure. Just a minute.
All right, here's a link. You can find like different events, and
Yeah,
there would
I found
be,
it.
yeah, there will be a link to the slides.
Also, the Eduhub community page has kept the link in the comment section. All the attendees are requested to fill that form, that Google form. It will act like attendance for you all, and you will only get the certificate if you fill the form. I'll put this in the comment section, this link.
Thank you.
And before ending the session, I would like to thank the Department of Computer Science Engineering of University of Engineering and Management, Jaipur, and ACM chapter for conducting this webinar. And also a very special thanks to the Vice Chancellor, sir. And also you, Roman, we all were very delighted with the kind of knowledge that you shared with the attendees. And at last, I'll thanks to all the attendees for joining today's session and being so patient with us. And thanks to all. So I think we can wrap the session here. Can we, Dr. Chatterjee, sir?
Yes, you please wrap this session. I would like also to mention the name of Mr. Sahitya Roy for taking the initiative of organizing this on behalf of the Eduhub community and the University of Engineering and Management ACM chapter and the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Do
organizing
you
the
want
event.
to? Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.